MS Now's Nnamdi Egwuonwu was following some of the big names in Michigan over the weekend. Also with us, Maya Rupert, a former senior advisor to the Elizabeth Warren campaign and former campaign manager to Julian Castro. Greg Bluestein is a senior political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in Battleground, Georgia, and an MS Now political contributor. Great to have you all here. Maya, I'm going to get back to the message, but let me ask you a big picture question first. You obviously were in the campaign trenches during the 2020 race when there were, and I had to go look it up again, there were 27 declared candidates. That field narrowed pretty quickly. I think 16 dropped out before the first primary. But if you are seriously considering a run and you're not already out there, are you behind?
I mean, I think in some ways, absolutely, especially if for candidates who are, have less name ID, need to inject themselves into the conversation. Obviously, so many of these stories start getting written and the sort of front runners, people start talking about them now. I would say if people are thinking about it and they're not already in office, now is a good time to start making news. It's definitely, there is absolutely still time, but this would be the moment to start injecting yourself into more of these conversations because the conversation very clearly has already taken off.
Yeah, and Greg, we have heard from a number of contenders, including Senator Ossoff, as he runs for re-election in Georgia. The word I heard several times there was corruption. There was this strong anti-Trump, anti-corruption message. I know there's a debate within the party over whether a Trump focus is the smartest strategy. Should it be totally on the economy? Because you can go after Trump, but his approval ratings are already at a record low. I wonder what you're hearing there on the ground.
Yeah, well, here in Georgia, and by the way, all 5 of those candidates have recently been to Georgia, if that's a sign of what's to come. But here in Georgia, Senator Ossoff, he's running for re-election. Essentially, part of his message is he's going to be a check on Donald Trump. Of course, he opposes Donald Trump. Of course, like other Democrats, he vows to fight the Trump agenda. But he's also saying, look, if you elect me, I will help be a check on all of that. And he's mining the same anti-corruption playbook that he used to win back in 2020. You just played the words he used, Mar-a-Lago Mafia. He knows that in order to win Georgia, you've got to win not just Democrats. You can't win alone with Democrats in a state like Georgia. You've got to win swing voters and disgusted Republicans. And I think he thinks that's part of that playbook is winning them over using that anti-corruption message.
Nnamdi, you were in Michigan over the weekend where, as I said, a number of those potential 2028 contenders were at that Democratic Party event. What did you hear from voters?
Well, the voters we spoke to in Detroit were thrilled, frankly, to see all of these candidates. You can tell that there is some excitement as that party works to figure out how to expand the base. And in 2028, when we know who the nominee is, hope that Democrats can win the state. But what was interesting is we also spent time in Dearborn and spoke to residents of that Arab majority city that, if you recall, due to frustrations over the Biden-Harris administration's handling of the war in Gaza, denied the Democratic Party votes. Donald Trump picked up Dearborn, which, again, was shocking because it's a city that typically in Democratic hands. Voters there, we asked them, as you watch Donald Trump and his administration oversee expanded conflict in the Middle East, do you have any regrets about not supporting Democrats? And what we were told is a resounding no. Take a listen.
I'm so upset with the Democratic Party, and this is again coming from someone who has been a lifelong Democrat and who has worked for the Democrats in the past as well. But I'm very ashamed with them for not producing a candidate that we could all get behind.
I have never been a Trump supporter, and I do not like what Trump is doing with this. I don't think Biden is doing any better.
And Chris, I'll point out that one message we heard from one of the 2028 hopefuls that spoke, Cory Booker, was kind of geared towards voters like you just heard from, those that maybe couldn't get over a single issue. His message to them is if you agree with someone 90% of the time, it may be worth just getting into the fold and supporting them, because now you have someone in office that you may not like a whole lot more.
Yeah, actually, Maya, let me play that because I think that is one of the concerns that I've certainly heard from Democrats who have said everything is looking good, everything is in our favor. We're just going to probably find a way to screw it up. I mean, that's essentially the message I've heard from some more pragmatic Democrats. But here's Cory Booker.
I saw it with Kamala Harris. There were too many people that say, I don't agree with her on everything. I mean, 90 out of 100, I agree with her, but those 10, I can't do it. Well, you may disagree with her on 10% of her views, but you let someone get in office who you disagree with on everything.
So he acknowledges in that speech, later in the speech, that the party should have a robust dialogue during the primary season. But he also said division is our kryptonite. How do Democrats avoid that? And, where is the line between, say, some differences on Middle East policy versus things that are going to just make people feel like this is more of the same?
Well, what I would say is we're having two different conversations, right? Obviously, in a general election, the question of the 90 versus 10 feels like a really straightforward one. But we're about to walk into the primary season. And I think that preemptively starting to say to voters, hey, you need to give on some of these issues is the wrong message. What I think candidates should be doing is listening. The Democratic electorate has changed. That is undeniable. And so candidates should be listening to who the voters are and what they're asking for, and particularly on some of these moral issues, some of these values issues. I think that the people that voted, they're not thinking of it as I voted on Middle Eastern policy or I voted on foreign policy. They're thinking I voted on values. This was a moral issue. And so trying to get voters to vote against their values is much harder than trying to meet people where they are. And I think Democrats have done this before, right? We've seen what happens when candidates try to convince voters, for example, the inflation that you're feeling isn't really happening. As condescending and difficult as that is a message to make, it is equally condescending to try to convince people that their values are not worth standing strong on. And I think what we need are candidates that are hearing that and evolving their views to meet the moment that we actually see the Democratic electorate at. I think it's a big opportunity for candidates right now.
Well, I think, Greg, former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg feels pretty bullish. He told voters over the weekend, quote, there is no such thing as a permanently red state. Now, okay, but are you saying it's not permanent in the next 40 years? Or are you saying it's not, permanently red in the next 40 months? So let's take a look at your state, a rare state that I think is genuinely purple, right? There aren't that many of those. What are you seeing and feeling on the ground that may give folks an indication of where this could be going? Again, midterms coming up at the end of this year, but then you got another 2 after that to get to the presidential.
Yeah, purple, periwinkle, pink, you name it, right? But it's not red, it's not blue. And Chris, what you articulated earlier is exactly the mood in Democrats. There was a gala last weekend with Governor Beshear spoke, Senators Ossoff and Warnock spoke, all potential 2028 or future presidential contenders. And the worry for Democrats is, they feel like they have the wind at their backs. They feel like things are going in their trajectory, but they're worried because the last 2 midterms, they felt that way as well in Georgia, and they ended with either Republican sweeps or near Republican sweeps in 2022's case. And so there's this feeling that Democrats are worried about not squandering the opportunities they feel like is laying at their feet right now, with the polls showing Trump with high disapproval ratings, not just among Democrats, but also independents as well, and even some Republicans, and opportunity as long as they can get united behind a single candidate for some of these top races in Georgia.